The Barn Rebellion, a fight for freedom. Have you ever built something with your own hands, only to have a stranger demand you tear it down? That's exactly what happened to Jake Malone, a rugged, self-reliant farmer in the rolling hills of Willow Creek, Tennessee. Jake had just finished constructing a sturdy red barn on his 5-acre property, a dream he'd worked toward for years. But one crisp autumn morning, a sharply dressed woman named Karen Whitaker, president of the nearby Willow Estates Homeowners Association, stormed onto his land with a letter demanding he demolish his barn for violating their community standards. The catch? Jake's property wasn't even part of their HOA. What followed was a fiery clash of wills, a battle of principles, and a lesson in standing your ground that would leave Karen and her HOA reeling. Jake's property sat just outside the manicured boundaries of Willow Estates, a gated community of pristine lawns and cookie-cutter mansions. His land, inherited from his grandfather, was a patchwork of wildflowers, old oaks, and a creek that gurgled through the seasons. For years, Jake had lived quietly, tending his vegetable garden and dreaming of a barn to house his tools and maybe a few goats. He wasn't rich, but he was resourceful, spending months hauling lumber and hammering nails under the Tennessee sun. The barn was his pride, painted red to honor his grandfather's old farmstead. But to Karen Whitaker, it was an eyesore, a hideous structure that clashed with her vision of suburban perfection. Karen's letter was polite but dripping with condescension. It cited Willow Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC and RS, claiming Jake's barn violated rules about exterior structures and property aesthetics. It demanded he tear it down within 30 days or face legal consequences. Jake was stunned. His land wasn't part of Willow Estates. Checked the deed when he inherited it. His grandfather had refused to join the HOA when the community was built, opting to keep the family's land independent. Jake called the HOA office, expecting a quick resolution, but Karen's voice on the phone was icy. Your barn lowers our property values. Comply or we'll escalate. Jake's blood boiled. He wasn't about to let a group he didn't belong to dictate what he did with his land. Jake wasn't one to back down, but he knew he needed to fight smart. He dug into the county records, confirming his property was indeed outside the HOA's jurisdiction. Armed with this, he sent a polite but firm letter back, stating he wasn't a member and his barn was staying. Karen's response was swift. A second notice, this time threatening a lawsuit and claiming his barn was on an easement that belonged to the HOA. Jake's heart sank. Could there be some truth to this? He hadn't heard of an easement, but doubt crept in. That's when he reached out to Tom Hargrove, a retired lawyer who lived down the road and had a reputation for taking on petty tyrants. Tom, a grizzled man with a penchant for whittling, was the twist Jake didn't see coming. He'd left the legal world after decades of battling corporate bullies, but he hated HOAs even more. They're like mini dictatorships, Tom growled, flipping through Jake's documents. He confirmed there was no easement. Karen's claim was a bluff. But Tom uncovered something else. The HOA had been overstepping its boundaries for years, bullying non-members into compliance with threats of fines and lawsuits. Tom had seen it before. A neighbor forced to repaint their house. Another fined for a mailbox that didn't match the HOA's approved style. He grinned at Jake. Let's give them hell. The confrontation came at the next HOA meeting, held in the pristine Willow Estates clubhouse. Jake and Tom marched in, uninvited but undeterred, with a folder of evidence. Jake's deed, county maps, and records of the HOA's past overreaches. Karen, perched at the head of the table like a queen, bristled as Jake stood to speak. My land isn't yours to control, he said, his voice steady but burning with conviction. You've got no right to tell me what to do with my barn. The room buzzed with whispers as residents, some secretly resentful of Karen's iron grip, leaned forward. Karen scoffed, insisting the barn was a community nuisance and claiming the HOA had implied authority over nearby properties. Tom stepped in, his lawyer's voice cutting through her bluster like a blade. He laid out the facts. Jake's property was exempt, the easement claim was baseless, and the HOA's threats were legally unenforceable. He dropped a bombshell. If you pursue this, we'll countersue for harassment and abuse of power. The room erupted. Residents who'd been silent for years began airing grievances fines for minor infractions. Karen's insistence on approving every blade of grass. A soft-spoken woman named Ellen, who'd lived in Willow Estates for a decade, stood up. "I'm tired of this," she said, her voice trembling. "You fined me $200 for planting roses without permission. Maybe Jake's right to stand up to you." The tide was turning, and Karen's face flushed crimson. She tried to regain control, banging her gavel and shouting about order. But the room was slipping from her grasp. Karen's empire crumbled in the weeks that followed. The HOA board, spooked by the threat of a lawsuit and the growing unrest among residents, voted to retract their demand against Jake. Karen, humiliated, doubled down, hiring a lawyer to press the easement claim. But Tom was ready. He filed a countersuit, alleging the HOA had engaged in a pattern of intimidation against non-members. The case never made it to trial, faced with mounting legal fees and bad press. The HOA settled, agreeing to leave Jake alone and pay his legal costs. Karen resigned as president, her reputation in tatters. Rumors swirled that she was planning to move, unable to face the neighbors she'd alienated. Jake's barn still stands, a defiant red beacon against the backdrop of Willow Creek. He painted a small sign for it, "Malone's Haven Built Free." For Jake, it wasn't just about keeping his barn. It was about proving that no one could bully him into submission on his own land. The victory sparked a quiet revolution in Willow Estates. Residents began questioning the HOA's rules, pushing for reforms to limit its power. Jake became an unlikely hero, a symbol of standing up to overreach with grit and truth. What would you do if someone tried to control your home, your land, your dreams? Jake's story shows that fighting back with facts and courage can topple even the most stubborn tyrants. Share your thoughts. Have you ever faced an HOA overstepping its bounds? Or would you stand your ground like Jake? Let's hear your take on where the line should be drawn.